you all tonight?
Great.
Good. Okay, I'm going to move this just a fraction of an inch. Thank you for writing this story, Gina. It's very funny. And you will see how funny it is. Indeed. All right. So, I am very happy to be here, and I'm very happy that you are here so I can read to you. That's very good. All right. I'm just going to begin because that's the best way to do it. This is called The Slingback by Gina Mulligan. Did I ever tell you about the slingback that got away? It was June last, a Wednesday. I broke fast on a muffin packed with blueberries the size of clip-on earrings, and OJ so fresh I'm still picking pulp out of my teeth. It was just before dawn, and though the house was dark, the air pulsed with the promise of a fresh day. Barry was asleep. The sheets were tucked under his chin, and his face covered in a thick balm to ease his sunburn. I gave him a quick peck on the top of his head, to which he groaned and rolled away. Barry's one of the good ones. Still, you've seen that glazed stare when you return from an invigorating trip and try to get them to share in the thrill? They won't ever get it. It's not in their DNA. My gear was already loaded, so I shoved a protein bar and a bottle of water in my tote, swung it over my shoulder, and set out. It being the start of summer, you probably think I went to Riverwalk or Mill Creek. A good start for a novice, and not bad if you're hoping to bag a nice trouser for work. Can you guess where I headed? No? I motored all the way to Bayshore. Turns out it was a good thing I ate that muffin. As I eased onto Capitol Highway, the morning shadows shimmered like ripples on Folsom Lake. A line of thin haze floated just along the treetops, and the radio was tuned to Barry's sports station. For a few miles, I tried listening to the low voice drone on about water temperature, tide currents, and worm bait. Can you imagine? Have you ever been to Bayshore? Well, it's an hour if it's a minute, so it was best I left when I did. Even with traffic, I made good time, slipped into my spot early. Sorry, I can't tell you where it is. But then I know you've got secret spots of your own. Don't you just love getting there before the schools of squealing teens? It's peaceful. While waiting in the parking lot, I cracked open my window and the water bottle and took a deep breath. The aroma of plastic wrap and damp cardboard filled me with joy. Just then, the sprinklers came on and the rhythmic tapping put me in a hypnotic state. I was in the zone, preparing to cast a wide net, when all of a sudden a street sweeper clattered right behind me. I jumped and spilled water all over my captain's chair. I should have seen that as the first omen of the day. When I was a girl, my mother made me catalog and chart every outing. The young ones today aren't getting any training. You've seen them, all that drifting back and forth, tottering against the flow and spiked mules. Oh, I've always found it's best to start out easy, navigate the specialties, and get warmed up a bit. So after a quick check of the map, that's just what I did. I cruised through Bass and J. Crew looking for red tags. I picked up a coral tank, but tossed it back, too small. A cobalt blouse caught my eye, so I looked at it. I hooked it just before a lady wearing sneakers. Yep, you got it right. Sneakers, of all things. I don't even think she was using a slip knot. Anyway, I was just trolling and had even left my best lure in the car. That's a little secret I can share. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. You haven't heard about my side trip. I'll be darned if the whole thing didn't just jump in my lap. After the sneaker sighting, I decided on a quick break. It was maybe a little early, but I needed to gear up and stave off the air-conditioned chill. What could be safer than gliding into the coffee house? A cup of brew in hand, I sat and watched the ebb and flow. Frustrated mothers tangled with restless kids, and retired men sat resigned to their roles as lookout. Just as I watched a power walker dart around a fleet of window gazers, my view was cut. A girl of maybe 5 stepped right in front of me. She was wearing loose jeans, a pink t-shirt, and a terrified expression. My first thought, hike up my slacks and shoo her away before she draw others. My second thought, well, it was the same as my first, really. But then she spoke. I can't find my mom. I should have seen this as the second omen of the day. After a long gulp of coffee, I turned to the girl and said, "Show me your hands." I pulled a wipe from my case and gave her sticky mitts a good swabbing. Then I said, "I can take you as far as the security station near Coldwater Creek." She took my hand and we set out north. We chugged along as she took small steps that weighed me down. Neither of us spoke, but her grip was firm and her eyes were filling fast. After a quick stop, we spotted Mom with the guards, and the girl wormed away from my hold. Before mooring herself to her mother, she held up her orange Julius cup and waved. I couldn't send her away empty-handed. That wouldn't be sportsmanlike. A quick glance at my bulba confirmed I was behind schedule, so I hoisted my satchel, lowered my shades, and headed to the car. It was time to prepare for the anchors. Over the years, I've put platinum streaks in my chestnut hair, worn Dior tweed and bucket hats, and even donned spotted rubber boots in a different fad. Sure, sometimes these helped grab a salesperson's attention, but they weren't reliable. It took many years of tweaking and trying, failing and honing, buying and returning to realize you can't beat classic style. Go ahead and try this trick if you want, but using props takes practice. At the car, I tucked my plastic bags in the trunk, then switched from my tote to my Louis Vuitton top handle. Yep, a real one, sister, with the cowhide trim and brass padlock. Some equipment has to be the best. I coated my lips with gloss, teased my crown, and gave it a good spray, then closed the trunk and went round to the passenger side. My trusty hook was hanging in the back seat. As I caressed the smooth cloth garment bag, memories of glorious outlet jaunts, cove boutiques washed over me. Who could ever forget a corded gold slicker or a tiger-striped clutch with matching scarf? I unzipped the bag with methodical rhythm, removed the contents, and raised it to the sunshine. Beams of colorful light radiated across the sea of cars before I slipped both arms through the holes at once. The vest is made of emerald satin with a black silk lining. It's fitted and hangs just to the center of my hips. Delicate white crystals along the edge shimmer in the light, and the pockets are adorned with a mix of semi-precious stones. I know a vest in San Fran with actual rubies. When I've snared the perfect pair of jeans, maybe I'll spring for a ruby or two. I'm saving diamonds for if I ever bag the fabled flattering bikini. My bait ready, I went straight back to the vortex. The department store was quiet except for lilting piano music floating from the floor above. The air conditioning was crisper than around the island kiosks, and the air smelled of fresh leather and body spray. A deep inhale told me I just missed a recent casting of Chanel No. 5. Unfazed, I pushed straight through the gauntlet. Even seasoned experts were scared away by the fake lashes and pursed lips, but I'm here to tell you, you don't have to loop around. As long as you stay steady and keep a good pace, you can look for free gift with purchase without getting snagged by the perfume sample piranhas. I reached the second floor ladies' department without incident and paused to survey the area. Now, you know I'm not one to brag, but it's just plain fact that several snuck peeks and began circling. They were taken in by the shiny colors. Testing the waters, I picked up a pair of tangerine-colored crop pants and waved them around a bit. Within seconds, I had a nibble. "Can I start the fitting room for you?" It wasn't until I had gathered several pieces that I headed to the dressing room. This was where the real work began. Too long, too tight, too loose, too short. Can you bring me a size 8? Does this come in aquamarine? Do you know if there's a matching jersey. No, I still don't need any hose. By the end, I brought in an iridescent turquoise cardigan and black speckled A-line skirt. Not a bad showing for the effort. Since you never want to stay in one area too long, I was down the escalator and on my way to the mall inlet when a glimmer caught my eye. Years of dealing with fluorescent glare has made my eyes sharp. So in one graceful motion, I turned. That's when I saw her perched beside a drab black moccasin. She was a beauty. Right then, I altered my course and steered straight for the shoe department. Lovely vest, the salesman said. I nodded my appreciation for his valuable attention, then focused on the prey. The salesman backed up to give me room. There's a debate as heated as white after Labor Day about how long you should inspect a shoe. I say it takes as long as it takes. You can't rush these things. I held her in my hand to test the weight, then examined the softness of the leather and quality of the sole. You may not believe me, but the heel was this big, 5 inches if she was an inch. She was a slingback, all right, a unique shade of deep indigo covered with thin copper veining and delicate rope straps that would make wound around at the ankle. Immediately I knew the perfect pairing. My voice caught just a bit, but I say yours would too. Size 7, I croaked. I touched the engraved plaque on my baton and said again, size 7, please. Though the salesman adjusted his crimson tie before ambling toward the storeroom, I caught the flicker in his eyes. He was already posing for victory photos and calculating his commission. Why? Because in my delight, in my vest's swaggering arrogance, I had made an amateur mistake. I never checked the tag to see if she put me over my limit. Watching and waiting is the hardest for me. While keeping a keen eye on the stockroom door, I sat on a tan vinyl lounge and slipped off my blowfish deck shoes. Another salesman passed, dangling a rainbow-colored box. I didn't recognize the markings and made a note to check my next issue of Fly Fashion. Then I saw a flash of red above several black lids. I froze. The salesman approached as if in slow motion, his face a mask of control and good humor. I knew, and he knew I knew, but he didn't want to rock the boat. I brought a 6.5 and a 7.5. The 7 is out. I apologize. We're restocking next week. He did not address the other 2 boxes set just beyond my reach. He didn't need to. I kept my voice soft so as not to startle him when I said, I'll try the 7.5. He slid the fitting stool in front of me. While I got into position, he removed the lid and carefully untangled the slingback. She was a fighter. First, he peeled back black tissue and found each shoe wrapped in yellow paper. There was a flaky adhesive, and after several attempts, the salesman left to get a pocket knife. Once the paper was cut away, there was a wedge of padding under each strap and protective cardboard over the heels. When at last she was freed, I wanted a moment to savor and admire her splendor. But the salesman clutched my ankle. He slipped my right foot between the bands, and I felt a deep bend in my arch. The salesman then guided my left foot and worked the buckles with trained hands. As soon as the clips were secured, he motioned toward the mirror. I stood. The first few steps were challenging. The leather was stiff, and I wasn't surprised by the flopping. She was a tall one, and there was just enough room for my foot to slip. I clamped down with my toes and made my way to the mirror. I spun until I could see the full taper of her heel. The color was rich, and the delicate strap narrowed the look of my calf. Then, as I lifted my foot and twisted it back and forth, toe pointed down, the copper veining captured the light. She was magnificent from every angle except one. Too long, I said in a flat voice. The salesman appeared at my side and said, "I brought similar styles in your size." I found my seat in a few floundering strides, then sized up the others. A black pump with robe accent was followed by a purple wedge with a snakeskin pattern. I pushed them away in disgust. The salesman had thought, and left to probe inventory at other locations. He returned with a scowl. I countered that he might have the slingback in another color, but he shook his head. We were both exhausted. My feet were tender from slipping them in and out of new leather, and I glared with disdain at the temptress still on her pedestal. Yet this was when years of training took over. Without so much as a word to the salesman, I seized the display by the heel and turned back her strap. 7. This is a 7, I said with a newfound second wind. It is. Our system says it's a 6. I held her up for inspection before the salesman rushed to the stockroom, leaving a billow of tissue paper in his wake. Not wanting to wait, I slipped her on. She was flawless. I could hardly breathe. In all my years, she was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I tottered around, glowing from covetous compliments and pausing to admire her in every mirror. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I whipped out my energy bar to steady my nerves. Just as I was ready to storm the back room, I glimpsed the salesman heading my way. My pulse raced, and I readied myself with a wide-mouthed grin. I could already see the silver-striped shopping bag sitting beside me on the ride home. In my extreme exhilaration, however, I failed to notice one thing. I must apologize again, ma'am, but I can't find the mate. This was when I noticed his hands were empty. I snapped. I yanked off the stag slingback and used her to club an innocent hassock. A shoehorn within reach skipped across the floor and bounced off the counter railing, and my spew of expletives scattered a flock of text messaging tweeners. Though many take pride in raving loud enough to need an escort, remorse made for a long trip home. While fixing dinner that evening, Barry noted my brooding and asked if I was upset. Maybe I should have tried to explain, but I didn't want to talk about it. Instead, I told him everything was fine as I chucked my apron and slapped a piece of baked salmon on his plate. Ours is a dangerous sport, and we all know and accept the risks. Still, I often wonder how many of us are lost, chasing stock into the abyss. Some claim it's time to stow the gear and take to the net, but I like the open air and smell of warm cinnamon rolls. Besides, I'm not one to dwell. Sure, no two are alike, but perhaps some slingbacks just aren't meant for the pavement. That was June last, a Wednesday. I haven't been back to Bayshore since, but there's always next season.